Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and guys, we have a lot to get to in Montreal. They hired a couple new guys. Dominic Ducharme gets taken out. We see Vinny LeCavalier come in. We take a look at all the stuff with the trade rumors. A lot to get to today, so let's get right into it here for the Montreal Canadiens. So the first one is headlines from the TSN 1200 radio. This is from Darren Drager. The Canadiens are open for business. GM Kent Hughes has already been told by a certain number of players, I don't know how many that is, that they're open to change. I don't believe anybody has formally requested a trade. Now, that has since changed because Jeff Petrie requested a trade out of Montreal. And then this is from Pierre LeBrun. I actually just made a video about this, potentially a blockbuster trade for 3 teams. Spoiler alert, the Habs were one of them. And this is something that kind of continues that thought process. So keep an eye on the Rangers and Habs between now and March 21st. The Canadiens could fill some Rangers needs. Montreal would rather add prospects over draft picks. The New York Rangers pipeline is drawing Montreal's interest. And the reason for that is the Habs president of hockey operations, Jeff Gorton, it wasn't that long ago, he was the general manager of the New York Rangers and drafted a lot of the players right now in the Rangers organization. So that is definitely going to be interesting to look at here in terms of where the Habs go, maybe with a deal with a crosstown Original Six team in the New York Rangers. So this is from Elliot Friedman. I believe if the Canadiens made a long-term coaching change, there's a better than zero chance it was going to be Jim Montgomery. Long history with Kent Hughes. And that was kind of an old report because now we've heard that things, this is from NHL Trade Rumors. Canadiens Josh Anderson embarrassed after their latest blowout. Things are getting messy in Montreal. And that's when the hammer dropped officially. And this is from Jean-Charles Leroy. The Canadiens head coach Dominic Ducharme is being relieved of his duties. The Canadiens fired Dominic Ducharme. Montreal went 8-30-7 after their Cup final appearance last season under Ducharme. 8-30-7. That is pretty much expansion team numbers. And we have one this year in Seattle. They're doing a lot better than that. So they had to hire a new guy, and this is from, per Kevin Weeks, Montreal Canadiens hire Martin St. Louis is joining the Canadiens as their new head coach. He's currently been an assistant coach with the under-13 AAA team in Connecticut, which is closer to his home. But Marty St. Louis now going up to Montreal. Very exciting here. He's obviously a Francophone, so it continues that whole dynamic. Whether you like it or not, you're taking former players that don't have a ton of experience. I think this is an interesting hire. I think there's a lot of fanfare behind it. I think there's a lot of potential behind it as well. And this is no discredit to Martin St. Louis. I just wonder how good of a fit he will be behind the bench. And this is a big step for him. So I'm excited for the opportunity. Obviously, he's a Francophone. He fits the whole vibe of what the Habs look for. He continues that culture that they've really been ingrained, the pedigree of this organization. So we'll see how that goes. Then things got interesting with Vinny LeCavalier. So the Canadiens are expected to name Vincent LeCavalier the assistant to the general manager. The Canadiens are expected to name Vinny LeCavalier as the team's assistant to the general manager as soon as tomorrow. And that was from Marc-Olivier Baudin. And then we ended up hearing some reports that Vinny LeCavalier actually tweeted out. He's like, this is not true. I'm not joining the Habs management. This won't be happening. And then within a week or two, when everybody forgot about it, all of a sudden he is named the assistant general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if it was more of a tactic to make sure he was fully in the door. But that was definitely a little bit interesting. I wonder if it was down to the money side of things. That's why he didn't want that getting released. So then we also heard in terms of the draft, and this is when, we're getting to the good stuff. We're getting to the meat of this video in a second. The 2022 NHL draft may be moved from Montreal if the COVID restrictions aren't lifted. That was from Gary Bettman at the All-Star game. it's more of a threat. I think that the policies have to start getting alleviated. I don't know how it is up in Canada or Quebec in particular. I know they're very, they're tough, tight restrictions. But in the States, we've already started to get rid of masks and vaccine cards at the gate. So I don't know if they're going to go that far yet. That might not be till maybe the fall when we start to see that happen. But that's definitely something to look at. So now we get to the juicy stuff. So the first one is a guy that's already been traded. So this is outdated now, but you can kind of see what led up to it. So this is from Elliotte Friedman. There are a lot of teams penciling in Canadiens forward Tyler Toffoli with the Calgary Flames. Interesting. People have been saying not to count out a return to Los Angeles for Tyler Toffoli. Again, this is all Elliotte Friedman. Among the teams interested in Ben Chiarot, St. Louis, Carolina, Rangers, Florida, also the LA Kings and Calgary. Both of them, too, may have interest in Tyler Toffoli. So Tyler Toffoli, long story short, you guys have already seen the video. He has already been traded. He was traded to the Calgary Flames. Pretty nice trade, honestly, for both teams. I think that was a pretty fair trade. And then that kind of segments us into the next spot, which is Ben Chiarot. So Ben Chiarot is a big guy that everybody's been talking about. A rental defenseman. His contract ends this summer. And he was a pretty big force, truthfully, for the Montreal Canadiens in last year's Stanley Cup playoffs. The St. Louis Blues are, and this is from Darren Drager, the St. Louis Blues are heavily interested in Ben Chiarot. I also look at Florida, Boston, Toronto, and the Rangers. So a bunch of East Coast teams other than St. Louis. The Canadiens are going to get a good amount in return for Ben Chiarot. A first-round pick and maybe a prospect. So I think that's a pretty good spot there for the Habs. If they're going to get that price for Chiarot, I would take that. I think that's a really good base for them. Again, I think they are leaning more toward the prospects because they don't want to wait a lot of time to develop all these guys. If they're just getting a ton of draft picks, you're looking at least 5 years for those draft picks, unless they're really high-end draft picks to develop. So again, you're probably looking at they want the prospect side of things. But Ben Chiarot, I really have him penciled in to go to St. Louis already. I think he is just such a good fit there. He fits with what Craig Berube is doing with the Blues. And you look at that top four right now, right? If you look at him coming in, you have Colton Parayko, Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, and then you add in a guy like Ben Chiarot. He kind of fills the void of Vincent Dunn, who ended up going to the Seattle Kraken. So I think there's definitely reason to believe that this is a good move for the Blues. And what looks like is going to be another playoff run for the Blues. They've struggled a little bit recently. Looks like they're going to be back in the playoffs this year. So I definitely see Ben Chiarot being a fit there. This is from Dan Robertson. He wonders if the Kings and Flames could be fits for Ben Chiarot. Now, truthfully, I think that Giordano will probably stay on the West Coast, maybe going to the LA Kings or the Calgary Flames. I think those are the two front runners right now for Giordano. But if they don't get Giordano, I think Ben Chiarot would definitely be a nice prize as well. So I think again, you're looking at the same sort of teams for really any market that Mark Giordano is a potential trade in. You're also looking at guys like Ben Chiarot, Luke Shen, who's up in Vancouver. Those three names are all being thrown around the same teams, right? Florida, St. Louis, LA, Calgary, and even Carolina to some extent, and the Rangers. That's what we're hearing from Elliotte Friedman. The Blues, Panthers, Hurricanes, and Rangers are all interested in Ben Chiarot. I could see the Rangers, again, we've made a video already talking about this, but I could see Ben Chiarot being a good fit for the Rangers as a placeholder for Patrick Nemeth as he's been out with personal issues. I think he could be a really nice addition to the Rangers blue line. And the Rangers have the draft picks. Ooh, they also have the prospects. So if the Rangers were willing to give up maybe a guy like Capo Caco, I know, it seems a little crazy, but a guy like Capo Caco, what about maybe a guy like Vitaly Kravtsov? They've been trying to trade him away. The Habs could get some good pieces from guys like Chiarot, and if they added another player, you could really make a big deal there. And this is from Eric Engels, a Canadiens insider. The Canadiens will definitely get at least a first-round pick for Chiarot. Really good stuff there. The Canadiens could opt to move Ben Chiarot in the next week, and that was from Pierre LeBrun. So again, we could be seeing a trade sooner rather than later for Chiarot, as the Habs may look to set the market this year for the trade deadline. A first-round pick and a prospect for Ben Chiarot means you could get this for that said player. That's kind of how the dominoes are going to fall. And this is from Eric Engels again. At least 12 teams interested in Ben Chiarot will cost at least a first. Now this kind of segments us into the next guy. The Habs are gauging Jeff Petry's value. Dallas and maybe Detroit among other teams interested. It's going to cost a ton for a team to acquire a Josh Anderson. So that is definitely another thing we'll get into. But the first one, we're going to talk about Petry next. So Jeff Petry, so this is from Eric Engels. Teams like the Red Wings and Stars would like Jeff Petry, but at a retained salary. So that is an important figure to remember because Jeff Petry does have some term on his deal. And that's something that definitely has to kind of ring in there. He has 4 years left on a modified no trade clause, no move clause, 6.25 per season. So ideally, I think teams would try to rack that down to at least $5 million per year. But Jeff Petry is not young either. Jeff Petry right now, oh God, he's 34 years old already. Jesus. But Jeff Petry, again, it seems like a lesser... they have higher priorities right now. And even Josh Anderson, 6 years at $5.5 million per year, 27 years old. That's a really good contract. I don't see the Habs moving a guy like Josh Anderson, but Jeff Petry, been tied to the Red Wings and the Dallas Stars. Probably the replacement to a guy like John Klingberg. This is from Kevin Allen. The asking price for Jeff Petry is currently a second-round pick and a prospect. I think there is something to be said about Jeff Petry, and now you're looking at sort of a situation where maybe he's a little bit lesser value than a Ben Chiarot, even as a longer-term contract. Again, the contract almost weighs down his value, and not to mention he is 34 years old. So Jeff Petry, make sure to watch out for that potential deal here over the next couple weeks. This one's interesting too. So this is from Elliot Friedman. Some teams in the Western Conference have kept an eye on Christian Dvorak this season. I've always been high on Christian Dvorak. I think he's one of those guys like Christian Fischer. Christian Dvorak and Christian Fischer were out in Arizona, and nobody was talking about them because they were in a very small market with the Arizona Coyotes. It seems like teams are starting to get more interest in him and trying to see what he is outside of Arizona. And he's been a pretty good player. I think what you're looking at with a guy like Christian Dvorak, he's currently on the injured reserve, the IR. He signed a 4-year deal. He's making $4.45 million per season. That's a really good contract. And this contract will take him until he's 30 years old, so he could cash in his chips again before he kind of hits it, So I think that's interesting, and I look at teams on the West Coast that may be interested. Again, this is just speculation, but I think teams like the Calgary Flames could be in the mix there. Even the Vancouver Canucks could be in that kind of the mindset that they want to go that direction. I'm also looking at maybe a team even like the Minnesota Wild that they considered on the West Coast. That was a guy they were looking to pursue last offseason before he ended up going to the Montreal Canadiens, so that's definitely an interesting thought there. Now, this is from Darren Drigger. Moving on to a Quebec native, Jonathan Drouin. So the Canadiens would like to move Jonathan Drouin, Mike Hoffman, Christian Dvorak, and Artturi Lehkonen. Excuse me. So I think we're seeing Dvorak and Hoffman as kind of trial guys that Bergevin brought in that they weren't really maybe the best fit there. So Hoffman has 3 years left. He's making $4.5 million per season. I think this is an effort for the Habs to move out as much salary as they can and maybe go big game hunting this summer. I've already made that video. It was very controversial. There was the Habs fans that were like, yes, we love the idea of Fleury and Bergeron and Letang and all these guys coming in. But then there were the Habs fans that were like, hey, listen, we're rebuilding. We don't need to add big contracts that are going to hurt us down the road, blah, blah, blah. And I do get that. I get both sides of the argument. I was just making that point. And now you're hearing about not necessarily short-term, these are longer-term contracts for Dvorak and Hoffman. And even Anderson and Petrie, they could get better next year, right? No, it sounds like they really want to clean out house. So that is definitely something that is kind of ringing in my ear with that. Also from Eric Engels, if any team is interested in trading for Josh Anderson, they'll have to give up a lot. And you're probably looking at, again, it's so funny how they got him. It was Max Domi for Josh Anderson. They really won that trade. You're probably looking at a first-round pick. Like, you're almost looking at a Chychrun price for Josh Anderson. I think that's how high the Habs are on Josh Anderson. I wouldn't be surprised if him, Suzuki, and maybe a guy like Romanov end up being the captains of this team one day in leadership roles. So definitely something to look at there. Also from Engels, the Canadiens have continued contract talks with prospect Jordan Harris. There's still a possibility Carey Price will play this season. Not going to happen. This is going to be a real issue for the Habs. I don't think Carey Price will play again. Kent Hughes, Jeff Petrie, if we can find a trade that works for us, we're going to do it. So I think there's definitely the sentiment that Carey Price, we're probably not going to see him play in the NHL again. Jeff Petrie's on his way out. Ben Sherratt's on his way out. Like, the Canadiens are looking to clean out house and get younger. And I like that idea. I think this fits with what they're trying to build. Dominic Ducharme is out. They've got Marty St. Louis, a new voice behind the bench. They've got new voices in Vinny Lecavalier and Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton. This is going to be a really big boom for the Montreal Canadiens. Expect everything to get blown up, and I think it'll be for the better. I think what the Habs have done this season, it's been really frustrating. I think Habs fans are very upset with how this season has gone. All the media coverage they get, this is not the Canadiens' standard. This is not up to Les Habitants' expectations, and they need to get back to that. And again, I think based off of what happened last year, going to the Stanley Cup final, you could tell the gap between them and the Lightning pretty quickly, but man, just how the mighty have fallen, right? So guys, that is it for today's video. Guys, comment down below, what do you think of the Montreal Canadiens? All this stuff, all this speculation I had about like 15 or 16 different things to show you today, but the Habs have been busy, and I expect that to continue up until March 21st. So guys, if you aren't subscribed already, make sure to subscribe to the channel down below. I'm going to be starting to put out polls for you guys. I'm putting out comments. I'm trying to get more active in the community tab, so make sure to keep up with that, and it's easier to do when you are subscribed to the channel. And like I said, as we get closer to that March 21st deadline, we are exactly a month from the deadline. So make sure you're subscribed for all the latest trades and all the stuff going on there. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time. Go Habs.